Hello! In my November catch-up video, I showed these two little booklets that I made, and I thought it would be really fun to fill them out entirely with different watercolour paintings. This will be filmed over 2 videos because I have quite a lot of paintings to do, but I have all of my ideas ready to go, so let's get into it! So in this video, I'm going to fill out this floral booklet. This is the first one I ever made. It has one folded piece of watercolour paper in, making 4 sides here, and I also have another piece in this pocket, which I really need to redesign this whole booklet because it's not that great and I really hate that piece of washi tape, but I figured I'm going to paint in it anyway because that paper's really nice. I had ideas for the paintings, but I really didn't know which paints to use, so I pulled out a bunch of different boxes and I was just going to make it up as I went along, pretty much. I was showing these Old Holland paints, but I didn't actually end up using this particular palette. I did use the other 3 though, so I've got Holbein paints here. It's a very messy tin, but there were some really useful colours in that one. I also used this large Roman Schmoll palette because there are some beautiful greens and they came in really handy for the paintings that I was doing. And in this Cloverleaf paint box I have some Sennelier watercolours, if I can ever figure out how the stupid thing opens. I can never remember, it always takes me ages. But here are all of these beautiful paints inside, and I just really like that Helios purple. I thought that would come in handy for something. And the other item that I did not show because I decided to use it at the last minute are some Supracolor watercolour pencils by Caran d'Ache. So now it's time to get into the first picture, drawing it in with the Supracolor pencil. I decided that in this booklet all of the paintings would be flowers because I wanted them all to kind of relate to each other. And it goes with the theme of the paper that I put on the outside, which is floral, and that pocket, which also has flowers on it. This first painting is a lotus from a photo I took earlier in the year, and in fact all of the pictures I used in this booklet are from photos I've taken this year. All sorts of different flowers. This first painting though is not my best one. It's always the way the first picture I ever do is usually the worst because I haven't really warmed up yet. And it looks like a fried egg for quite a long time, though I did think I managed to pull it together by the end of the painting. I'm using some of the bright magenta colours and also Potter's Pink from the Roman Schmoll set. That was a little bit more granulating, but it was quite a nice colour for the edges of the flower. This one was really difficult. The petals are all folded in on each other, and it turned out to be a whole lot more complicated than I originally thought when I was first looking at the picture. So I did have to work in layers because it looks like an absolute mess at the moment, but I wanted to paint in the background first, and I've gone with a very bright phthalo green along with some darker forest green around the edges just to get a bit of vignetting going on. I think if I was to redo this painting, I would add in some specific leaves as well, rather than leaving the whole background as a blurry green. I actually did this in later paintings, you'll see, and I think I improved quite a lot as I worked my way through the booklet. So I wanted to add in some more details in the centre of the flower, and I'm once again using the Supracolor pencils by Caran d'Ache. They're really good pencils and I'd highly recommend them. The only thing is I still wasn't happy with the centre of it. Once I drew in those distinctive circles that are on a lotus, that helped quite a bit, and I started going over everything with some different coloured pencils just to shade in and get some definition on those petals. I think this also helped. And slowly over time it started to look more like an actual lotus flower instead of whatever it was when I first started out. But this is a good tip if you're struggling to get definition in a watercolour painting. Use some pencils over the top. They can be watercolour pencils like these ones, or you could use regular non-soluble pencils as well. I guess just think about whether or not you might want to activate the pencils as well in water, in which case then you need to go for the watercolour pencils. The paper that I'm using in this little booklet is from a larger sheet of Canson Moulin du Roy, which is my absolute favourite watercolour paper. It's 100% cotton and 300 GSM. That's one of the reasons why I only put in 1 sheet of paper folded over, because I only have limited amounts of it. It's really hard to get now that they've stopped manufacturing it in most places. You can really only get it from Jackson's Art. But I do want to use up as much of my stash as possible before the sizing goes bad. I lost a bunch of footage here where I painted the stamens with some acrylic paint because I needed something opaque, and now I'm finishing this little painting up with some white ink. And I'm moving on to the next picture. Apologies for the abrupt change there, it's just because I had some issues with filming, oops. But this is a piece of paper that was in the pocket, and it's the same watercolour paper that I was using before. So I drew in a quick sketch of a tulip, and now I'm painting it using pretty much the same colours that I was using in the first picture. I will show all of the paintings at the end of the video, just so you know. But I was starting to loosen up here, and this painting went a lot more smoothly. It was easier to do, and I really enjoyed this one. In fact, this is one of the favourite paintings I've done in this booklet. I think just because it's quite a simple picture, but it turned out really effective because of that. A lot less complicated when it came to the petals, that's for sure. And it feels a lot more painterly as well, whereas the first painting was too tight. Like I was trying to get in too much detail rather than focusing on painting more loosely, which is what I like to do with watercolours, although I do like to include some detail. The greens I'm using here are from the Roman Schmoll set, Hooker's Green and Sap Green. Both are beautiful greens for foliage, and in the background I decided to go quite a lot darker. I'm using Sennelier's Forest Green for that really dark green, mixed in with some of the Hookers and Sap Greens from the Roman Schmoll set. So I was using multiple brands of paint in my different paintings. They all work together, there's no issues there. But that Forest Green by Sennelier has to be one of my all-time favourite greens of any brand. It's so beautifully dark, it works really well for backgrounds and shadow areas. I love it so much. Perylene Green is another good alternative for a dark green, but that tends to be a lot duller than the Forest Green, which I think has a phthalo mixed into it, but it's such a pretty colour. I just really like it, and it mixed well with those two Roman Schmoll greens. I'm touching up a few little errors that I made in the painting, covering up that area where the paint had run into each other, and using a little water to blend it out. And then I'm just adding another layer to the leaves to make them look a little more realistic and not just one single shade of green. I actually left the flower mostly as it was because it just looks so pretty, but I've got my trusty white ink out. This is Dr. P.H. Martin's Bleed Proof White ink. It is the best white ink I've ever used, and I highly recommend it for putting on juicy white highlights over the top of paintings, especially watercolour, because it just makes everything really stand out. And I really love how this painting came out. That's the only one I actually signed as well. But now we're on to painting number 3, and we have another flower. This is a protea, which is a native of South Africa, but they also grow really well in Australia. I'm using 2 reds together from my Holbein watercolours. Pyrrole Red and Permanent Alizarin Crimson. That crimson is a much deeper red, and it was nice just blending the two together to get some definition in that red. And both of these are wonderfully saturated pigments. I really love my Holbein watercolours. I would like to get some more one day because I only have a small set, but I've used them quite a lot because the whole palette that I chose is very useful for all sorts of things. I also have a few unusual colours like a grey and a pink and also a shell pink. The middle of the flower was a bit of a mess here, but I did manage to pull it back later in the painting. But I'm going in with some really funny shaped looking leaves, and these just look so weird. But I think the whole painting actually turned out really well in the end. But as per usual, there's almost always an ugly phase, and I will look at a painting thinking, how am I going to pull this together and make it actually look like I want it to? These protea leaves also have a red outline around them, and I was trying really hard to not blur the red into the green, and I was having to wait for things to dry before I could go over with another layer. It looks very disjointed at the moment, but once I started filling in the leaves properly and adding in more detail, it really did come together, and I do like the colour palette that I'm using. It's those same greens from the Roman Schmoll set, and overall for this whole booklet I did only use a fairly limited colour palette. Because I only have 5 sides in this tiny sketchbook, I really wanted all of the paintings to be related to one another and look kind of similar in the colours that they had, and also the theme, which is flowers for this one. So I used Hookers and Sap Green for the background and some of that really bright alizarin crimson just to get some vibrancy and also to give you the idea that there are more proteas in the background that are out of focus. I also added in a few more leaves just to balance the whole painting, And even though I was using my own reference photos, I did change it up quite a lot for the actual paintings themselves, making up the position of some of those leaves. Now I need to address the center of this flower again because it's a total mess, and I was trying to get a rounded look so everything is coming to a point in the center of the flower. It's still not quite right, but I did fix it in the end once I got in with that white ink, because now I'm covering up a whole load of my mistakes and adding in details which were also in the center of the flower. Already it's just looking so much more like a protea than it did before. White ink just saves the day every single time. And even though bright highlights may not be as apparent in a photograph, I think they really bring a painting to life, and it just makes everything look a lot more 3D and lively. I also added in some random dots in the background, a little bit more shading, and that's the finished painting. I have another one here which ended up being a lot more complicated than I first thought. It's a watercolour, which is a native Australian flower, and I'm really fascinated by the shape of these. They have such weird petals. And as I was drawing them out here, I was thinking, what have I done? This is going to be so complicated and difficult. But it didn't end up being too bad. Once I got the shape of the flower, the rest of it kind of came together quite quickly. And it's most definitely not a perfectly accurate drawing, but it's close enough that it ended up looking quite a lot more like a waratah than I was expecting it to. So I'm calling that one a win. That went out of focus just for a little bit here, but it will come back into focus right now, thank goodness for that. Once again, I'm using pretty much the same colour palette as I did for the protea, though I did add in some brilliant pink from Holbein along with the permanent alizarin crimson, so that I would get a clear distinction in values from light to dark and not lose all of those little details that I've drawn in. I was using fairly small brushes here as well, and the brushes I'm using, because I haven't mentioned that, are silver brush black velvets for the most part, and I also had a very tiny Montmartre paintbrush which I was using to paint on the ink. But these silver brushes are some of my absolute favourites. They are beautiful to work with and I really love painting with them. And for the leaves, I'm using a mix of hooker's green, sap green, and a little bit of phthalo green, because that mixed in well with the other greens and just gave the leaves a bit more of a colour variety. I definitely prefer to have some of the leaves painted in sharp focus and then the rest of the background can be blurry. The mistake I'd made in that first painting was having the whole background blurry, and it made it look like the flower was floating on nothing, but this just really breaks up the painting having some more distinctive leaves. In this particular one, I decided that the background was going to be really dark green, so I've got my trusty forest green out and I'm painting it on neat, not worrying about wet on wet or anything like that, just painting the wet paint onto dry paper, and then it gives it a nice dark even coating. I love how the dark green contrasts with the flower. I'm really happy with the colour palette that I chose. So just painting in a few details, and now I've got my trusty white again because all of the paintings have ink on them, just to finish them off and to tie them all together. Let me know in the comments if you like to paint on white highlights. It's one of my favourite things to do because it really feels like the painting's actually going to be finished, and it elevates the painting to a whole new level. And that's just my opinion. But I have one more painting to do on the last page of this sketchbook, or booklet. I don't even know if it can be classed as a sketchbook because it really doesn't have that many pages, but I'm drawing in a gerbera which was growing in my garden, and I took a photo of it a few months ago. By this stage I'd gotten really comfortable with drawing, and the painting also went quite quickly with no issues. I'm using pink and alizarin crimson once again. Because gerberas have a lot of overlapping petals, I didn't want wet paint to blur into each other, so I'm going around painting some of the petals, and then once those are dry I can paint the other ones that are in between, and then you can see a clear definition between them. I was painting in pink and then dropping in a bit of red just to let it run in to each other, just to add a bit of interest, and then some of the petals that were behind I painted in with a darker mix of that red and pink. I do want to make some more of these booklets over time, but there are some improvements that I would make. For a start, I would have a pocket on both sides so that then you could have 6 pieces of paper, and I'd also make the pockets only come up halfway so that it's easy to pull those pieces of paper out. And I guess I could fold more pieces in to make a larger signature. I just don't want to make the books too big because then it takes forever to finish them. The idea of these booklets is that I could then do a few paintings and then the whole thing's done. So it's a really quick way to accomplish something without having to fill in an entire sketchbook that's got like 60 pages in it. Let me know if you'd like to see how I made these little booklets, with improvements of course. Because they're fun and quite easy to make, they could be gifted to people either as blank books, or you could paint them and then gift the whole thing, or you could keep them for yourself. I did actually make another one and I gave that to my dad for his birthday. I don't know if he's painted in it yet. Maybe I'll find out at Christmas if he's done any paintings in the little booklet. But for this painting, I just added in a stem and 2 leaves, and the rest of it is going to be a fairly blurry background, using different greens from all of the palettes that I have. What you can't see in this video is how messy my desk is. I had stuff everywhere. The whole surface was covered except for this tiny area where I'm filming. But I had a really good time painting in this booklet and filling it up entirely. It's a small project that is quite easy to do, and I like that. And as with the other paintings, I finished up using some of that lovely white ink to add in my highlights and define the edges of the petals. It's been good to do a whole bunch of paintings together because I had been struggling with art block, and the only way to get out of it was just to really push myself and come up with a bunch of paintings on one theme. This really seems to have unclogged my brain, and now I'm feeling a lot more confident again. And the creativity seems to be flowing a bit better now, hooray! So now I've finished everything, I'll flip through the whole book. This is what the cover looks like with that scrapbook paper, and then we flip to the first page with my funny looking lotus, and this much better looking tulip. Maybe now you could see the colour palette working together as well. So even though they're different flowers, they do kind of relate to each other. I really love this page spread, I think both flowers look good. And then on the last page I have this bright gerbera. It only just occurred to me now that I could have stuck another pocket on the other side and painted a 6th flower, but that's not happening because I've already decided I've finished this video. Thank you so much for watching, I hope you've enjoyed it, and do come back for my next video, which will be part 2, and that's painting in the other book. I have a whole bunch of different ideas with a different theme. I'll see you in my next video. Swatch you later, bye!